Wole's story is not just about building Bankole. His life is very inspirational, very challenging.
My focus is constantly on what am I becoming, much rather than where am I going. I've grown older. I've learned that discipline is not something that you necessarily enjoy, but it's something you submit yourself to in your own best interest. In life, you first of all get a big vision, then you go and get the training and the capacity to execute on that vision.
Does the pain of death ever goes away?
Death is like an amputation. It doesn't evaporate, and there are always things that you wish were different, especially if the person passed when they were young. I think it's a very limiting mindset to say I can only succeed in this place. Money is one of the things that if you are not properly grounded in your understanding can very quickly make you start to idolize it. All of the business that I've built in the real estate value chain are trying to solve problems. When you compromise your values, you actually undermine yourself long term. You actually lose out on the really big things that can happen for you.
Wow.
You clearly saw what he lost. Many people don't get the benefit of seeing what they lost by what they settled for. The reason that temptation is called temptation is because it's designed to be attractive. If it is not attractive, it will not be tempting. For me, the best measure of success is where I'm becoming. As far as I'm concerned, from a Christian perspective, success is measured by how much more you're developing the fruits of the Spirit. The way to properly think about value is to know that your soul is worth more than everything in creation.
What's your hope for Bankole?
That's where every player in the value chain is going to plug in and interact and transact and just deliver projects. Your value should be defined by something that doesn't change.
So how do you stay spiritually vigilant?
Prayer, study, fellowship, having friends who are on that same journey. Jesus has made a way for you to spend eternity with him. And the only eternal destiny that is worth having is the one that you have in Christ.
You are welcome to The Voyage. This is another interesting session of our podcast, The Voyage, the trials, the transitions, and the triumphs of people generally, not just immigrants. I've realized that these different categories of life is a season that everybody goes through in life. And my guest today is Wole. He's a friend and he's a brother. He's one of those rare minds that his life has been shaped, not just by where he has been, but his life has been shaped by pain, purpose, and conviction that now drives his business enterprise, that drives his relationships. And this is going to be an exciting, a fun, and also an inspiring session together. He's also an author. So sit down and enjoy, and let's just dive into the story of Wole. All right, you're welcome to the podcast, The Voyage.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here. I'm not sure I do a lot of interviews, so this one.
So we will just coast in directly and see how we go through this together. So when we talk about Voyage, like I said earlier on, it is a journey and it's also an adventure. So when you think of your life and you think of the word voyage, and let's take a high level overview of your life from the beginning up to this point in time. How will you describe your life in terms of the voyage that you have been through?
So this is a part where I try to find one word to say for what it is. I would say satisfying, yet, looking forward to the rest of the journey. I try to not think of life in the sense of heading for a destination. I try to think of life as what you become along the transitions of your life. So my focus is constantly on what am I becoming, much rather than where am I going. Of course, I have a sense of where I'm going ultimately, but my focus most of the time is what am I becoming right now, even as I go on that journey. So the word to use will be I'm experiencing growth on an ongoing basis. So great journey so far.
Wonderful. So it appears that your life is being shaped not just by a destination per se, but by the character formation as you go through the journey of life.
I think you're putting it much better than I. Yeah.
So let's go back from the beginning,
Okay.
from the northern part of Nigeria. Wole the boy, take us back. What was life like in Zaria?
Oh, well, so I was born in Zaria. That's in Kaduna State in the northern part of Nigeria, late 70s, 77 precisely. I was the last child of a family of 6 children. I have much older siblings. And I grew up pretty rustic university city, right? Pretty much the vast majority of people who lived in that context were either working in the university, Ahmadu Bello University, or working around the university. So it was a very academic environment. Everybody was going to some school or was involved in, in the university in some way, shape, or form. My dad, at the time that I was born, was working with the university. My mom, all through her life, was a business person. And so I grew up in this house where I had much older siblings and much older parents, apparently. And my background was that I was raised Catholic.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and we pretty much went to church. My mom was an extremely prayerful person, so there was family altar every morning. And believe it or not, we went to church pretty much every day of the week during the weekdays, right, for morning mass, it is called. So you wake up 6 a.m., you go to church for a 30-minute, quick service, and then you come back and get my mom's store opened and then get ready for school. I went to school in the university campus. So yeah, pretty much what it was like growing up those days. Yeah, I mean, you had your future ahead of you and you just thought you could be anything you wanted to be. There was a lot of belief and yeah.
So that's a very interesting beginning. Can you describe 1 or 2 instances of your early childhood memory that has come to shape who you are today?
I will say maybe shaping in terms of, as you reflect back and sort of try to make a sense of, what life has sort of turned out to be. I would say growing up and about maybe 12, 13, getting confirmed in church. So in the Catholic Church, you do what is called the confirmation, sacrament, and you attend some catechisms, and then you pick out a name of a scriptural character for, sort of like the grace that you want in your life. And I picked out Solomon.
Solomon.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because my desire at the time was I wanted to grow up to be a wise person. Yeah, and sort of looking back, I can see, my life just trying to focus on growing in wisdom over that time frame. So I'd say that's really been one thing that I can take away from childhood that still stays with me up until now. Yeah.
Wow. Wisdom, the pursuit of wisdom. Yeah. And you have seen that very obviously. I can also attest to that. There has been a demonstration and manifestation of wisdom in your endeavors and careers. So still talking about your childhood memory, once you wrote about an experience on the farm, whether you were harvesting beans or something like that, can you take us back into that? Did that build a level of discipline into you, that level of humble background? What was that like?
Yeah, so, I mean, growing up in Zaria, pretty much everyone in that context did, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people had farms. We had farms, and my uncle had lots of farms in that time. And we went to the farm pretty much most weekends, especially during vacation. So farming was part of lifestyle as a whole for people in that context at that time. And the particular story you're referring to is, so we had this high yield beans that my uncle grew on his farm, and my siblings and his own kids and all of us will pack ourselves into vehicles and go to the farm on the weekends. And for this particular beans, during the harvest, because it was such a high yield beans, and beans basically creeps on the floor, and you have to basically pick up the pods and put them in sacks. And among us children, we coined the Yoruba phrase for this particular beans, like we named the species Ewa Sonidaro. Basically, it cripples you because by the time you spend an afternoon just picking up all those pods and you get up, you could barely walk.
I'd say.
Yeah, but tying that to discipline and just the sort of grit that you develop growing up in that way, I would say in that generation, discipline came almost, with just your entire upbringing.
Yeah.
I'd say things are somewhat different now. And so, discipline, honor, respect for people who are older than you was just part of the training that you got in the 80s and into the early 90s. Yeah.
Interest. That's a very fascinating story.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about you talk about growing up as a Catholic boy, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I've seen times where I reflect back and I did not enjoy the constant prayer devotions. Whether you like it or not, you have to go to the church. And looking back now, I said, looking at how I'm raising my kids now, I wonder, should I enforce some of these routines that they may not even enjoy? When you compare your experience then and your faith right now, will you say that actually played a role in your faith right now?
Absolutely, without doubt. Okay. And I understand the part about not enjoying it while you're going through it. There's a scripture that says there's no discipline. It's enjoyable while you're going through it, but later yields, harvest. And the psalmist says, they that go, bearing precious seed, with tears. The seed time is not always convenient, and discipline is never convenient. But it brings a rich harvest, of just good character, of a life that is, shielded from a lot of unnecessary trauma. Okay, the memories of growing up, in that prayerful context, even though it wasn't enjoyable at the time. And my kids, I get a lot of pushback from my kids, even right now, as we try to do that family culture of having, devotions daily. So I would not say that I found it extremely enjoyable at the time, because you want to sleep, right?
Definitely.
And someone wakes you up at 5:30 and say, come and pray. That's the last thing you want to do. Yeah. So, but as you grow older, and as I've grown older, I've learned that discipline is not something that you necessarily enjoy, but it's something you submit yourself to in your own best interest.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now let's take a step forward in our conversation.
Yeah.
Was there a defining season or a defining experience that you will consider as a trial in your journey?
Maybe not in the sense that some people have, trials, say like Job. Okay, right. And one of the questions that I sometimes ask God is, I hope, like something really big and trying is not coming, because I've had a really good life. I haven't had any major trials in my life in that sense, but I've had ongoing need to overcome myself in order to get to where God is taking me to, right? And I think the biggest trial that anyone faces is to overcome themselves, is to overcome, self-interest and self-worship and all of that, and to increasingly be able to yield yourself to what God is working out in your life. For me, I can live with deprivation and sickness and all of those sort of things, but you can do all of that and still be all wrapped up in yourself. And that's not going to be a really big package. I think the biggest thing we need to overcome in life is not necessarily deprivation or sickness or any of those other things, but to overcome self, okay? To live a life that's not about, your own interest, but ultimately, what does God want me to do? And I say for myself, that's the biggest trial, because we can all get really focused on what we want and what's convenient for us, as against what is, God's best, idea for what we should use our life doing.
So in that regard, when you look at your understanding and your definition of, faith and success, has there been a moment where your faith about success has been tested?
I think at a certain season of my life, I think when I finished secondary school, I had a lot of,
Expectations.
childhood ideas. So I'll tell you what life should be like. Not all of that has panned out. And then as I grew up and went into careers, I was reflecting a while ago. So I'm in real estate largely now. And I think a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a friend. I reflected and said, oh, there was a point maybe like a decade and a half ago where some really grand, maybe even grandiose ideas about how to do real estate and all of that. And then I realized that in life, you first of all get a big vision, okay? Then you go and get the training and the capacity to execute on that vision. And so you may see some really huge thing you want to get done. And then there takes many years where you're not doing that thing. But in that time, you're getting the training and the capacity to be able to come back and do those things. Okay, so for instance, someone like Abraham got a promise and then took several decades for that promise, to be realized, because God was putting him in the shape to be ready to be able to actually take delivery of that promise and do right by it. So I've learned that the things that, may not happen when you want them to happen, it's probably because you're not ready for them to happen yet. So you need to go get ready and then revisit those things. And I have one really personal example of that happening. So my wife, first time I got interested in her, she wasn't interested for obvious reasons. She was in a relationship, right? And I kept, speaking with God about it. And God says, you know what? Put this thing aside. Don't talk to me about it.
Interesting.
We will revisit it. Okay. And the scripture that, he was using to talk to me about that in that season was Peter and his cohorts in the fishing boats and saying, look, we're fried all night. We haven't caught anything. And Jesus says, put aside your own interest at this point. Let me use the boats for what I want to get done. And then after I was done with that, they revisited the issue and they did catch fish. And it sort of turned out like that with my wife. When God was done with what he wanted me to focus on in that season, we revisited the issue, and the relationship she was in at that time didn't quite work out. And so, the door opened and then I got back into it. So constantly I see that sometimes you get a vision or you get an idea or desire that is godly, but the timing isn't right because you're not ready or because God just thinks that there's a better time to make that happen. So, yeah.
So when it comes to, you built several companies and you talked about, having a big vision at a point in time. And when you look at the reality today, some of them may have panned out, some of them may have not. Some of the companies that you have built today, when did you start envisioning about them?
Okay, so I think, I probably took my entrepreneurial, genes from my mom, because my mom was an entrepreneur all her life. She lived to just a few months short of 95. She was active most of, in those years. So the first company that we started, I was in university, right? And we started a landscaping company. Interesting with a friend of mine, right? But we sort of, the landscaping company was sort of like a placeholder for us, because in the practice of architecture, you can't call yourself an architect until you're done with school and done your pupillage and then been certified. So we thought, what is the unregulated space within this entire industry that we can play in right now without the necessary certifications? And it was landscape architecture. So we registered a company through landscape architecture. It's in the same space, but it's not exactly, the license part of it. So we started that company and then transitioned that company into a full, design, build, project management thing when we finished school. Okay. And then from there, I went into paid employment for a while. And then about 2011, I knew I was done with paid employment, at least for that season of life. So I came back out, did some consulting. And over the last 14 years now, I built a number of different entities still in the real estate value chain. So from design to construction management to finance to project management to property or asset management. So just building entities along that value chain so that you can come in at the beginning and we have a product for you on that entire journey.
Interesting.
From finding finance to build a project to actually managing the build to managing the asset that you build out of that.
We will come back into all of that because that is very interesting to me. But I'm still curious, Wole, was there a failure that actually broke you and also built you in the course of your life? Or a challenge that felt unsurmountable at a point in time?
Well, again, I have to dig deep to think of, I think one of the, and my wife, sort of points this out from time to time. I'm a generally very positive person. And so I often don't think of failure in the way that most people conceive of it.
Really? How do you think about failure?
I think that, so here's one example that can help. Now, when you're in primary one and they say 1 minus 2.
Is 0.
No, the correct answer is if you're in primary one,
Okay.
cannot go. Right? The correct answer is cannot go. Like, this is not a possible equation.
Yeah.
You can't take 2 out of 1. But that's just because of the amount of knowledge that you have at that time and what the education system thinks you can handle. So they teach you it cannot go. But a few years down the road, when you've done number line, you now know that 1 minus 2 is minus 1. So if you thought about that guy who said he cannot go as a failure, no, that's what he's been exposed to. So that's sort of like how I think about failure. I think about it, this is a season of life. I'm not ready for that. So incidentally, I wrote a book about this. It's just a book of short, devotions. And guess what the title of the book is? 1/6 is a good score.
1/6 is a good score.
Yeah. And the thinking is life is a journey. And that I'm scoring 1/6 today doesn't mean I failed. It just means that tomorrow I need to get to 2/6 and then day after tomorrow 3/6. And the kernel of thoughts on which I base that whole thinking is that after the first day of creation, God looked and surveyed what he had done and said, it is good. And he knew that he was going to do creation for 6 days. So he didn't think, because I've only succeeded for 1 day, then this is 1/6 and that's not good enough. So I've often thought about, just getting things done as a journey. And that if I'm not getting the ultimate outcomes that I'm thinking about today, that's because maybe I don't have the capacity or the exposure or the resources or the data points. And so I need to just get those and then move on to the next stage. So that mindset makes me experience failure in that sense very differently from, how other people think about it.
And that has been a common thread that I've noticed with some of the people that I've actually have as guests on my show, that their mindset about failure is not about a setback, but rather as an opportunity to try again.
Yeah.
And that,
Different way.
yeah, that it is not the end of the story, but it's just another part of an experience that is shaping who they are becoming. But let's talk a little bit about pain. Earlier on, you mentioned about your mom, that she was almost about 95 before she died. I can relate to that because I also lost my mom some 10, 12 years ago. How did you handle the pain of the death of a loved one?
Okay. And my thinking, and this is something I'm processing, my mom passed last year, is that I'm still processing death and grief, just coming to terms with what those terms mean. But I think what's more painful, and talking about pain, is that just after we buried my mom, 2 months later, my immediate older sister passed.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a lot harder to deal with than my mom. My mom was 95. She had lived, a pretty good life. My mom had lived a pretty good life, okay? She was a well-respected person. She had accomplished pretty much everything. She had seen her great-grandchildren, right? So, but 2 months after she passed, after she was buried, my immediate older sister passed. She was just 51. She was getting on 51. And that's a lot tougher than losing your mom who's 95. And she and I were particularly close because, we were the youngest too. We grew up pretty much in each other's faces. She was, again, my only sister out of, there were 6 of us kids. So she was only sister, and we lived together in Abuja, before I moved to Canada. So that's a lot more painful. And the way that I describe it is that death is like an amputation.
Say that again.
Death is like an amputation. Like you lose a limb. Your life's not the same again. Like you get on with your life, but that limb is gone.
Very true.
So that's sort of like how I see it. And in our own case, we have so many unfinished business. Like you grow up with this sibling, you have plans.
True.
As a matter of fact, about that time, we were thinking, okay, we need to take another vacation together. A couple of years earlier, we were taking a vacation, just us two. And we were thinking, okay, we need to redo this vacation thing, and all of that. And, my daughter was also planning that, she needs to come and visit us in Canada so I can drive her around, and all of those sort of things. But yeah, it's an amputation. You just realize that you don't have that limb again.
Does the pain of death ever goes away?
I think it lessens. The pain lessens, and I think you sort of, especially the person who was a believer when they passed, you sort of say, we're going to see again. It doesn't evaporate, and there are always things that you wish were different, especially if the person passed when they were young, right? As is the case with my sister. She was relatively young. So I think it pain lessons. I think you get perspective. I think you learn to laugh again. But there are things that remind you of it on an ongoing basis.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's really heavy. Now, let's move into another segment, begin to talk about your transitions in life. What role has your faith plays in your transitions in life, either in career or even with your relocation to Canada? I'm even surprised that somebody like you that is thriving, that is, doing pretty well for yourself back in Abuja, will one day decide to japa, if I will use that word, to Canada. Why?
Well, so I know people are like, jackbuying is like a big phrase now. People are really, super focused on it and all of that. But I say to people that I think we are over-focused on the idea when the borders that are concerned are international. Very black. People are there fighting every day. Like the average person grows up in, say, a village in Ekiti. is looking to move to Lagos. True. Like, is entirely primed towards, I need to move to Lagos so I can, increase my opportunities and all of those sort of things. My parents moved, first of all, from the village that we're from to Lagos and ultimately to Zaria, trying to shape their careers and all of those sort of things. So people are constantly moving. Like, that's part of life. I think people draw a line and say, once it's an international movement, then that's a different conversation. And I think that's where we lose the plot. But for me, moving wasn't economic in the sense that,
You are not looking for a greener pasture.
No, but my pasture, I travel with my pasture.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think
that's a different mindset.
Yeah, I don't think it's about where you are. I think it's about who you are. So think about Isaac, for instance. Every time he dug a well, the people will come and strive with him, and he will leave them the well and go and dig another well and find new water. Okay, it was about Isaac carrying the blessing. It wasn't about where you were prospecting for wells. Another example, and maybe Isaac picked this from his father, Abraham. Abraham said to Lot, you know what? We shouldn't be quibbling about opportunities and resources. You look at the vast array of what's possible, take what you want, and whatever is left, that'll be fine for me. Because Abraham was carrying the blessing. It wasn't really about, what they were divvying up and all of that. So that's my overall mindset to my personal economy. That is really not about, where you are. It's about, who you are, what covenants you're walking in and all of that. So moving wasn't fundamentally economic for me, at least on a personal level, but it is economic in the sense of what work I want to do.
Okay.
Yeah, so part of what I want to do is to be able to build a bridge between the West and Africa to allow capital to flow into real estate and infrastructure in Africa. And moving closer to that market and that constituency was something that I thought would be beneficial for that work. There were other considerations. Nigeria was particularly, restive at the time that we made decision to move. It was incidentally about the time of NSAS that we came to that decision.
Okay.
And just yesterday in Nigeria, they were marking the anniversary of that unfortunate event. So it was about that time. So it was very restive, and we just thought, we've had enough of this. Let's go somewhere where we're in the right headspace. But it wasn't fundamentally economic. We were doing very well as a family, myself and my wife. So, yeah.
So that is quite interesting to me, talking about that you carry your pasture with you.
Absolutely.
So what do you now say to the concept of be where your blessing is in terms of location-wise?
Well, so I think people, approach that idea very differently. I'm describing what I believe and what has essentially been my life story. I think it's really about, and I say to people, there are wealthy people everywhere on the surface of the earth.
Yeah.
There are wealthy people in every profession. Right? So it's not about where you are, it's not about the profession, it's really about you. And of course, this is fundamentally about grace, right? It's not like, you make everything happen for yourself and all of that. It's about what graces you're carrying, how you're walking with God. I often say to people that there are many things that, we've enjoyed as a family in our lives that we clearly know that we don't deserve, right? So there's the huge grace factor. But I think it's a very limiting mindset to say, I can only succeed in this place. True. I think it's a very limiting mindset. I think you go into environments and you can find opportunities and connections that, change things for you.
I'm very curious about the turning point for you in terms of this mindset that is, I don't want to say abnormal, but normal. Your outlook about life.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you in terms of the paradigm shift that you begin to have about life generally?
Okay, so that's something that's easy to sort of pinpoint. Okay. So when I finished secondary school, I spent some time with my older brother in Lagos. And that year, 1995, when I graduated secondary school, ASU was on strike, and they were on strike for close to 2 years. So there were no admissions into university. In fact, the JAM that I wrote in 1995, I used to enter uni in 1997.
Wow.
Yeah, because there were no admissions, so they didn't mandate us to write new JAM. So in that time, while waiting, I got a job in a bookshop. It was a Christian bookshop. So I had this whole world of books that I could read at no cost.
Wow.
And I just, every day went to work, I just read. It wasn't a particularly busy bookshop, so like it wasn't like there were many customers or anything. So I just had the opportunity to just be paid to read.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was a job that I was paid for, and I just went there to read day after day after day. So I encountered a bunch of books that began to significantly shift how I thought about things. Wow. So that I would say would be the turning point, and maybe what cemented that would be then me eventually fully making the transition to come to faith sometime in the middle of my years in the university.
Now, talking about your relocation to Canada, how has that stretched your family dynamics, your faith, and your career?
Okay, so while I live in Canada, I still work in Africa.
Okay.
All of my work is in Africa, right? And time zone is biggest, headache for me as, from a work point of view. But I think our family has settled in quickly to moving to Canada. Again, I reiterate the point that I feel like we're unusually favored and blessed. So first of all, we moved to a city that my brother-in-law lives in. And unlike many people who move to a new place and then have to struggle for finding accommodation and settling in, we pretty much had housing sorted out by the time we moved.
Okay.
Yeah, my brother-in-law and his family, very wonderful people, said to us, look, guys, you have no business going to pay rent.
Wow.
You should just leave it until you buy your house.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Unusual, right? So it's fantastic to have a great family. And so we essentially lived there until we bought a house. Right. So I never paid rent, in Canada, not once.
Wow.
From a career point of view, my wife left her job. We moved in June. And she said, you know what, I want to rest for 2 months and not do anything. Like, I've worked very hard the last 5 years. I just want to rest for 2 months. And by September, she had a job working for the government, in Saskatchewan. Like, it just came like that. I moved, and by September, I'd applied to go into an accelerator and was selected and won that cohort, joint first position, and got support for our business. Shout out to Collapse. Got support for our business, free workspace, pool of experts to work with, and all of that. So transitioning for us, again, is very different from what other people experience. Like, for many people, it's a struggle and all of that. So we feel really blessed that we've been able to move with very little hassle. Bought a property shortly after, and just keeping life going. My work is going on. I travel back and forth to make sure that my team, is getting our work done.
Now let's begin to move into your career space right now. But before then, I'm curious about one of the books that you've written, the Bible MBA. Yeah. What is that all about, and what was the idea that birthed the book in your heart?
Okay, so I've always thought that if you're going to be a Christian, you have to be a Christian practically. So one of the questions I used to ask early on, where are the Christians during the week? Right? Like, on Sunday, you can tell, they're in church, but during the week when everybody goes into workspaces and all of that, you're looking for Christians. So I wanted to be able to sync my faith life and my work life. I didn't want to have two separate lives function in different silos. And so I began to obviously try to find scriptural basis for every decision at work. And as I found more and more of those, I thought, I could actually put this together and help other people. So I thought, what's the most practical way to put that together? I thought, okay, put it together in a devotion, right? And again, the thing about favor and just being blessed, I was doing a program which a mutual friend of ours introduced me to. Is a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership offered by DAI.
Okay.
And so while I was doing that program, one of the facilitators turned out to be somebody who was on staff at Life Church.
Wow.
And Life Church is the organization that birthed evaporation Bible app.
Okay.
And so we got into a conversation, and I had given him, the printed version of the devotions. And he had mentioned about working for Life Church and that, maybe I should consider putting this on YouVersion. Wow. Like he came on a platter, just out of hand blues. And there it was, I did all of the work that was required. And it's on YouVersion, it's had over 5,000 completions. I was informed about 2 weeks ago. So that was how, decision to write that came. But overall, I think that my being in business is actually incidental, that my real work is to be sort of like a chaplain in the business environment.
Okay.
But that I need to be in business to be able to provide relevant guidance and counsel to people who are in business. So business is incidental, just like it was incidental for Paul. Tent making was not the work.
Yeah.
It was what enabled the work. True. So being in business for me is what enables me to do what I'm supposed to do, which is be a chaplain, in the business environment. So that's how I see it.
So you talk about where are the Christians during the week?
Yeah.
On Sundays, they are obvious out there. And why do you think the Christians actually disappears or their impact is not felt during the course of the week, and especially in the business space?
I think maybe there's no simple silver bullet answer to that. But one of the things, business is a unique undertaking. Unique in the sense that one of the primary outcomes that every business is supposed to achieve is to create profit.
True.
I said one of the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the sole purpose of business. In fact, it's not the cardinal purpose of business, but it's one of the primary purposes of business, like the lifeblood of business. If it's not making money, then it's not a business. So money is a very tricky thing to work with. Okay? Money is one of the things that if you are not properly grounded in your understanding, can very quickly make you start to idolize it. It can very quickly begin to stir up selfish ambition inside of you. Okay. So when Christians go into that arena unprepared, they can very quickly get lost in that whole space. Now, the business environment has insistently told believers that, there are different set of rules that you live by here, which is a complete and absolute, farce. But you do have to be seriously interested in reconciling your faith to your work to be able to actually succeed in doing that. So for instance, Jesus Christ says that the cardinal commandment is to love God, and that the second one is exactly like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. So as a believer, you need to take that and go into the arena and say, how do I square that with the idea of competition? If I'm supposed to love this guy as myself and he's working in the exact same space, trying to serve the same customers, how do I express that love when the hat that I'm supposed to be wearing, from a business point of view, is to compete with him, undermine him?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to live consciously in that space. Otherwise, you're just going to take business school principles and traditional business school principles and run with them. And many of them run counter to what scripture, teaches. Many of them run counter. Many of the imperatives of doing business the way that it's always been done will run counter to how you should do business if you're a believer.
So you are saying in essence that you are not primarily driven by the pursuit of money in your business endeavors.
No, I'm not. I think money is inevitable as an outcome of doing things properly, but that is not the why for doing it. And one of the ways that I describe that is, think of a vehicle that's trying to drive to a destination. That's the purpose of that vehicle. It's trying to get to a destination.
Yes.
But if you don't grease the wheels, it's not going to get there.
True.
So money is like the grease for the wheels. A business makes money so that it can get to where it's trying to go to. So all of the business that I've built in the real estate value chain are trying to solve problems. Okay. Part of it is solve housing problems, solve infrastructure problems. But you're not going to get there if you don't have money.
No, it's true.
Yeah, right. So I think money serves as grease to sort of reduce the friction to get to where you're trying to get to. Pays your bills, of course, you do need to pay your bills. Serves to, do corporate, good. You should need to do that. But it's not like I say to people, if it was just to make money, there are 1,001 other things I can be doing than trying to build businesses that I had to build. Like there are 1,001 things I can be doing to make money. So money is not like the main thing.
So you've had to resign from a job because you were asked to compromise your faith. How I'm still kind of not perplexed, I don't know the words to use now, but it's demonstrate a man of high standard and a man of high integrity. What was the motivation that makes you to say that you will not compromise your faith in the course of delivering your day-to-day job?
Okay. First, a man striving to uphold high standards and integrity. It's always a striving because every day, we encounter things that test our faith and our resolve. And Satan doesn't have off days.
Very true. It doesn't go on bedtime off.
There's no vacation for it. When he finished the series of temptations of the Lord in the wilderness, Bible says he left him for a season. For a season. Okay, I'm going to come back to. And he didn't come back. He came back in Garden of Gethsemane, right? To tempt him again to live for himself. Okay, so he will always come back. So integrity is not a done thing. It's, you're constantly striving and every day you're facing challenges and, issues. But to answer your question specifically, I do not think that we ultimately lose by giving up things to uphold our values. I think we actually lose when we compromise our values.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We can find many contemporary examples, but a good example from scripture is Esau. Oh yeah, what's my, birthright to me? Like, I need to survive right now. That's the decision that we all need to make. Do I keep my job, survive, and compromise something that is valuable? The Bible describes that sort of mindset as being profane. It says Esau was a profane person.
Yeah.
The easiest way for us to understand profanity in our time is somebody who has no regard, who talks nonsense and all of that. So when you compromise your values, you actually undermine yourself long term. You actually lose out on the really big things that can happen for you.
Wow.
Unfortunately, many people do not get the benefits of seeing what they lost, like Esau. Esau clearly saw what he lost. Many people don't get the benefit of seeing what they lost by, what they settled for. which is unfortunate. But yeah, you lose more by compromising on your values. I absolutely think I'm in a far better place than I could have been if I stayed on that. It was a pretty good job.
So,
But I'm in a far better place.
so these are very mind-bending paradigm that is against the norms of the society, that you lose more by compromising your values and your standard. So are you saying that you are not tempted to compromise?
Oh, you are every day.
Okay, so then, because for example now, one of the things, and this is I don't know how to put this right now. I find there are times, not all the times, that I find reasons to compromise very attractive. And at times I used to it, even though I did not enjoy compromising either my personal values or my personal characters, how can somebody, let's say in my position, that find saying or reasons to compromise attractive, how can we get to that stage where we no longer find it attractive, but find the reason to do the right thing much more compelling?
So I think I should say, first of all, that the reason that temptation is called temptation is because it's designed to be attractive. If it is not attractive, it will not be tempting, right? The reason it is tempting is because it is attractive. So that's the way it's designed to be, right? And I will say part of what I've done in the past, and I'll come back to your question, is to just exclude myself from selling things on a wholesale basis. So for all the years that I was in consulting and project management in Nigeria, I never did a public sector because I sort of know what that arena sort of entails. That's not to say that I'm not daily confronted with a need or a temptation to compromise here and there. So I mean, construction, real estate development, for instance, you interface with regulators, and in Nigeria in particular, it's very hard to interface with the public sector without people, wanting you to compromise in one way or the other. So that's something you're dealing with on an ongoing basis. It's sort of like Paul's, thorn in the flesh. You have to deal with it on an ongoing basis, okay? But how do you start to shift away from desiring or being overly tempted by, compromise? I think one of the things we need to do is to cultivate, our desires correctly.
Wow.
Okay. Cultivate, the right sort of aspirations. Bible talks about selfish ambition. I find out that compromise is often something that is presented to you in order for you to get something that you desperately want.
Yeah.
If we can reduce the desperation for things, compromise will lose its power.
If we can reduce the desperation.
Yeah. If we sort of change our definitions of success, we will find out that temptation will lose some of its power. Because the reason that you're, trying to compromise is because you want to get something.
True.
If you're sitting down in your house and you're not interested in anything, which is not, I'm not recommending that you just sit down slothfully. But I'm saying, if we say, if I don't get this, that's okay. But I'm not going to give this in order to get that. So I'm fine with not getting that. I think that would help. But I think overall, just from a, theological point of view, what Paul teaches is we need to die daily. Dead people don't respond to temptations. Right.
Ooh, so let's take a pause on that. And dead people, you do not respond to
They
temptation.
don't have the capacity to.
Wow.
Like they're dead to that thing, and I've been reading the book of Colossians lately, and it's one of the things that it talks about, that your response to this world should be as though you are dead, and says you should set your mind on things in heaven, right? So there's a certain deadness that comes to the things of this world, that it becomes harder and harder for Satan to find something to, really get you to this. So the first temptation, what was it? It said when Eve saw that like this was desirable.
True.
So it's what desire. That's what temptation sort of latches onto, the things that we desire.
Well, I wish we can continue to explore more on this, but I'm being mindful of time. Now, I'm curious, what's your idea about success?
So I said earlier in the conversation that I wrote a book, 1/6 is a good score.
Yeah.
My idea about success is that it's incremental. That success, again, is not a destination. It's not something you achieve and, oh yeah, I'm here now. Success, for me, the best measure of success is where I'm becoming.
Do you becoming? Okay.
Yeah, that's the best measure of success. All right. It's not a certain amount of money in an account. It's not some position. It's where I'm becoming. Because at the end of the day, the way to, at least that's what I believe, the way to properly think about value is to know that your soul is worth more than everything in creation, like every non-human thing in creation. Jesus says that a man on the ledger of profit and loss doesn't make any profit if he loses his soul, even though he gets the whole world. So on the ledger, that's a loss.
Well, so how do you measure that kind of success of who you are becoming?
So, and that's not to say that I don't measure success in things like how well the business is doing and all of that, because God also expects you to look at the faithfulness and effectiveness that, you're living out. So that's not to say you don't measure how successful you are in all of that. But to come back and be specific, how do I measure success personally? It's in how much fewer quarrels I get in with my wife.
That's a different. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, so because that's really the measure of success, at least as far as I'm concerned, from a Christian perspective. Success is measured by how much more you're developing the fruits of the Spirit. Wow, that's success. Like the fruits of the Spirit are the character attributes of a child of God, and so the more and more that I see that, I'm quarreling less and less with my wife, I'm getting offset less and less with my children, I know that I'm developing patience. Okay, the more that I'm able to endure suffering, somebody who's just terribly behaved, the more that I'm able to endure them without, getting angry and all of that. That's, the kind of success that I'm really working for. All these other ones are not going to get beyond this life. Success that is really long-term is that I'm building more and more the fruit of the Spirit. And I like to say to people that, there's no way to develop long suffering without suffering for people. Like, your pastor can pray over you and say, now receive long suffering. No, that's not how it works. So you have to be able to suffer to build that fruit of the Spirit. So for me, success really is how much more I can see evidence of the fruit of the Spirit. And that's what Jesus is looking for right in us. He went to that fig tree, Bible says, expecting to see fruits and not finding any, like there's no use for your existence.
Wow, that's interesting. So let's take a different direction there. Tell me about Bankole.
Okay, so that's my current big passion. As the name obviously tells you, Bankole means help me build a house. And originally, we conceived it as a way to help Africans in the diaspora to build projects remotely on the continent. Okay, at least that was our initial go-to market. But our vision was much bigger than that. It was to make it easier for capital to come into the construction value chain in Africa. And why is that necessary? Capital is extremely expensive on the continent. And if capital is expensive, it's hard to get development to happen. So a commercial mortgage in Nigeria is 30%.
30 what?
30% interest rate.
I hear the US, we are complaining about 6% mortgage interest rates.
Different strokes or different. A builder loan in Nigeria will be anything from 30 to 40%.
Ooh.
So what that means, I always, the conclusion very often is that life is more expensive for people who are poorer. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. And I'll give you examples. So if you're in a poor region, relatively poor region of the world, and your cost of capital is 40%, it means that what you're buying with that capital is a lot more expensive.
True.
It can be far cheaper if you get capital at 1%, 2%, 3% to acquire that asset or whatever it is. So one of our passions at Bankole is to increasingly de-risk projects on the continent so that it's far easier for capital to come at far cheaper costs. There's capital in other parts of the world that is chasing 1%, 2%, 3% returns. Sovereign wealth funds, for instance, are just about capital preservation. They're chasing 1%, 2%, 3% returns in many instances. If it worked the same way that things in the natural world work, so for instance, water will flow to the portion of least resistance, it will just flow there. If capital worked in a similar way, right, there'll be a lot more capital going where it is most needed. The reason why it doesn't go is because capital, whether it's human capital or God's capital, is after return and responsible stewardship. So nobody throws good money after bad, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to throw money into a dark hole where the money is not going to come out. Even God doesn't use resources like that. So I'm not expecting anyone, who stewards capital to put it into a space where they're not sure that capital is preserved or returned. So our responsibility is to create the risk scenarios and basically lower risk that allows capital from elsewhere to come to build the infrastructure and housing that Africa sorely needs. So that's what Bankole is about.
That's a very fascinating idea because I've come across several people who wants to invest in real estate in Africa that based on their previous experiences that they send money to their loved ones and, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the lane, they went back home to see the project and lo and behold, there was even no land.
Stories that touch.
Stories, nothing to show them for thousands of dollars or pounds as maybe that you have. So how do you de-risk this with your platform?
Also, a range of things. Fundamentally, Bankole provides project owners digital resources to manage projects effectively and allow all stakeholders, complete visibility of what's going on these projects, right? Yeah, you have a dashboard where you can watch your budget, watch your schedules. You can see risks before they crystallize and all of that. So on one level, there's the software.
Okay.
But on a higher level and depending on what the needs of that specific client or project is, we also provide boots on the ground to provide monitoring services for projects. So whether that's quality assurance or just making sure that the contractor is doing what he's supposed to do, that's our premium service, which we'll provide. We're going forward now and trying to actually raise capital and provide that to developers on the continent to help them build projects cheaper. And that ultimately benefits everyone, in the space, because then the guy who's buying is buying cheaper, he has more capital to do other things, maybe invest in education for family members and all of that. So there's a ripple effect if you sort of succeed in lowering the cost of housing for people and infrastructure.
Interesting. Now, you've talked about the risking, and also to redirect capital.
Yeah.
But what about the human risk factor?
Oh yeah, so that's probably as big as the capital, cost factor. Because unfortunately, there's not a lot of excellence in some parts of the region in terms of how people approach projects, right? So there's that, which is why on some projects and for some clients, we're able to provide that extra boots on the ground to actually make sure that contractors are doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's a huge gap in technical education and just, professional values in that value chain. And it's not restricted to that value chain, just professional values as a whole. There's a huge gap in terms of how people approach the work that they do. So that's going to be somebody else's, mission to fix the education that is necessary, the training that is necessary. Maybe when Bankole is, doing a lot in terms of revenue, and this is not maybe, for sure we'll be more than happy to invest in technical education just to skill up people, but it will have to be somebody else's mission to drive that. We definitely will be happy to provide, some sort of support for that, but that's an absolutely necessary to do.
So how does inconsistent or unreliable government policy plays into the real estate business dynamics in the African continent?
In the markets that were active, Nigeria being the biggest at this point, macroeconomic issues can really impact projects. And there are seasons when, right now, headline inflation is about 18%, but it was over 30% a few months ago. And if, you're doing 30% inflation, so one of the things about projects, the life cycles can be relatively long, right? So small size project, maybe 12 to 18 months. In that time frame, if you have movement in price of material for 20, 30%, that can completely throw your numbers out of whack. Because you do an appraisal to say this project is going to return X percent, but then material, which is responsible for about 80% of your cost, moves by 20, 30% in that time frame. What do you do? But that's for a small project. There are larger multi-year projects. So if you're building a housing estate, that's a multi-year project, maybe 36 months, 48, 60 months. Inflation over that time can double the cost of your project, triple the cost of your project. So the macroeconomic environment really impacts, what's going on. Just now in Nigeria, a new tax law has been passed. It's coming into effect in January. And so people are trying to understand that and how that impacts the industry. So yeah, government decisions, monetary policy, and all of those things impact the industry very massively, particularly because housing is the biggest expenditure that most people will make in their entire life. So the impact can be significant. If you were doing a project that's supposed to cost 50 million and it rise by 20, 30%, that's 60, 65 million. That extra 10, 15 million can make a massive difference in, that individual or that family's lives.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's so. On the last note, talking about Bankole, what's your hope for Bankole?
Okay, so what we sort of envision that it will be is the operating system for the housing and construction value chain in Africa. And by operating system, I mean that's where every player in the value chain is going to plug in and interact and transact and just deliver projects.
Are you saying you want to be the Microsoft of real estate in Africa?
I mean, that's the way to put it. Certainly, we want to enable every player in the space. We want it to be ubiquitous. Let everyone who's playing in that space be able to use the tools that we develop to deliver, projects more effectively and obviously cheaper.
Interesting. Wow. So you mentioned something that was very fascinating earlier on, that the one of the way in which you measure your success and growth is how less you quarrel with your wife. I still find that very fascinating and interesting. So how do you balance your role as a father, as an architect, as a spiritual leader, as an husband? You travels all over. How do you balance all of this?
Okay, so my life is very simple. It may not look like that on the surface because maybe I wear a number of hats, but my life is really simple. One, I prioritize family above all of my work. I prioritize my wife above my children. Yeah, our relationship is number one. We love our kids, but we make them understand that, look, you guys aren't going to come between us. So whatever you do, and kids want to, play you like to one another, especially in those teen years when they're getting smarter. They want to play, but we make it clear that we're a team, we're a pair, but we're one, and all of that. So my relationship with my wife is highly prioritized. My relationship with my family is highly prioritized. Work comes after all of that, right? And so the way that I've done that, for instance, when we lived in Nigeria, my wife and I, between us, did school runs every day by ourselves, even though we had a driver. There was no time that my driver went to pick my kids by himself. So we were present. It didn't matter what, how busy we were. We made it work, right? We were very deliberate and intentional. So for the first 12 years of our marriage, we did not have any, like domestic help. We did all of our chores ourselves, right? Because we wanted our kids to be raised in that sort of environment where they were having full-on interaction with us as, their parents. And that meant doing a lot more, household chores than the average Nigerian person or father would do. So we sort of know where our priorities are. And we got involved, obviously, very much with church, where we've always been involved with church. We've always been workers and ministers wherever we're served in any congregation. So we just try to strive for balance. The good thing is, I think if you're a believer and you don't have many unnecessary vices, you actually have a lot of time to do the things that matter. Like I always say to my wife, from work, I come home, like I don't have anywhere. If I'm going to church, we're going together anyway. So we get spent a lot of time. And sometimes also just decision making. So in the early parts of our marriage, for us, it was a priority to own one car so that I had the responsibility of dropping her off at work and picking her up. We could have gone to buy two cars, but we're losing the commute time together. It was a decision to only have one television in our household. And we even now we have one in the basements, right? And we have one, in the upper level. But for the, most time, one TV, so that we're all watching the same thing. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm watching this, then you're watching something else down there. So for us, just trying to build, togetherness into how we do things and structure our family. Now our kids are older, our oldest now drives, so she drives our younger brother to school and all of that. So yeah, we don't get to do that commute with them.
Okay.
But we still do, going to sports and all of that. Yeah. So just trying to make sure that you design your activities to, spend time with your family.
So I'm curious, in terms of how you were raised up.
Yeah.
Growing up in Zaria and how you are raising your kids right now, considering now that you are even in Canada, will you say that, the level of discipline, the level of structure that shaped you, will you use that to also nurture and train your kids? Or how has your understanding of discipline and child training been changed and influenced since your relocation?
To be honest, I don't think my views have changed because I moved.
Okay.
at all. I think I've always drawn my views from, something that doesn't change, which is scripture. Right. So even while I lived in Nigeria, my views, were drawn from that. Like how I interacted with my wife and my children was drawn from that. So moving to Canada didn't change that. I think that's what it should be for everyone, right? Like moving to Babylon didn't change how Daniel saw what you should eat or not eat. Like where you live should not define your values. Your values should be defined by something that doesn't change. Because we can live in many different places, right? But to the question as to discipline and whether there's a generational shift in how I see discipline, I think the older I grow, the more I value the sort of discipline that my parents gave. And I think it's going to be the same for my kids.
Wow.
I think it's going to be the same for every generation. Like, you're going to think your parents are necessarily difficult when you're younger. But as you grow older, you're going, oh, yeah, I actually appreciate, the way they live. Actually, I think it's just the cycle of life, how it is. I have one friend who's always, trying to say, oh, these children of nowadays, when we were older, and my kids laugh at me and say, I say things like, but I think this, my friend, is particularly, shaped to think like that. And what I would often say to him is, what we must strive for is to figure out the values we're trying to pass along. And we can pass on those values without necessarily using the methods that were used, prior. So one example I'll typically give him is, you have a washing machine in your house. Your parents probably washed their clothes at the tap. And their parents took their clothes to the river.
True.
The important thing is to make sure that people wash their clothes. They are responsible for staying hygienic. That's what you're trying to pass along from one generation to the other. You're not necessarily trying to pass along difficulty.
True.
There's no value necessarily in difficulty, right? You're trying to pass on stewardship, taking responsibility, and all of that. And the world is not going to be stuck in the methods that were used 100 years ago. You can't insist, for instance, that the only way to catch fish is to use a boat and nets the way Peter did it. No. That's going to change. The important thing is fish is nutritious. However you catch it, eat it. Okay, so yeah.
I'm curious about something else that we mentioned briefly, and that is, so there is this, I call it an epidemic phenomenon of husbands living in one country and the wife living in another country. And that is creating a lot of chaos in homes, breaking homes and things like that. What's your take on this epidemic?
Well, I think there are probably people who got into that situation without wanting to be in that situation. So I hope that, they're able to figure out a way to reunite their family. But I think people who are making that decision consciously, for whatever reason, are probably not making the best decision.
Really?
No, I don't think so. I think that, families should stay together. Essentially, there may be short periods where, for work reasons but I think that those periods should be short. I personally, as a family, it's a non-negotiable for us. We have to live together, my wife and I. I do travel maybe 2-3 times a year, maybe 2-3 weeks on any of those trips, right? But I try to keep it short. And I absolutely think that families should stay together as long as, there are no exigencies beyond their control. I think there are some people who are forced into those situations, but I don't think people should consciously make those decisions to live separate.
as I begin to wrap up, I'm curious about how do you stay spiritually vigilant? And also because it appears that you are a very intentional person and you're very meticulous in how you go about your things. So how do you stay spiritually vigilant? Are there certain practices that makes you to be well grounded?
I mean, every believer should have practices, right? And some of them are, obvious. We do a family devotion in the morning and most nights. I'm constantly in the Word or in some book. So I'm constantly striving to learn and grow, reading scripture in particular. I've always, engaged with a church family because I think while the Christian life is personal, it is also communal.
True.
So I'm constantly engaged with a church family. And I'm learning, and trying to train myself to be more, when I say more prayerful now, it will sound like. So I'm thinking of prayer more as the way I described it is spa for your soul. Like your soul actually needs prayer. Prayer is not a way to get things from God. It's a way to sort of go on onboarding and I just rejuvenate in God's presence. So I'm learning to pray more from that perspective. And so prayer, study, fellowship, I think a huge hack, for keeping spiritually disciplined is having friends who are on that same journey.
Very true.
Because you're ultimately going to fall to the level of your friends or rise to the level of your friends as the case may be. Yeah. So I think having friends who are also on that journey is super important. If you have friends who are not on that journey, they will impact your journey.
So what do you hope that one day when your children look back, what do you hope they will say about who you were and not just about what you did as a father?
So the things that I would like my kids to sort of hold on to and take into the future is that I loved them. I mean, when they're teenagers, they don't think so. You're just making their eyes, did it cause? Yeah. So but I'm hoping that they all live longer for them to grow through that phase. So I'm hoping that they recognize that I love them. But the most important thing that I'm hoping as it relates to my children is that they embrace and take on the legacy of faith that the generation before me passed to me. That's probably my most, apart from my own personal growth, that's my most important, desire that my children will carry on the legacy of faith.
So what do you do for fun when you are not building Bankole? What do you do?
So
Relax.
We take a lot of vacations. My wife likes vacationing. Yeah.
Favorite place?
Nature.
Nature.
Nature is my favorite place. And I think nature is beautiful everywhere. When I was living in Nigeria, I used to say to my friends, look up. Yeah, because I think we're so lumped into the hectic traffic and all of that. And you just looked at the clouds, you will see how beautiful they are. All that. So nature, and you can find beauty everywhere in nature. So anywhere natural, so that whether it's in the mountains or it's on some water body or it's just, looking at the clouds and all of that. So nature is my happy place. So vacations are something that we try to do pretty frequently as a family.
Interesting. Favorite food?
It would have to be plantain.
Really?
Yeah. And in the household that I grew up in, there were plenty of us kids. Where plantain is being fried, everyone is in the kitchen. Yeah, like, it will have to be plantain.
Interesting.
You can't not fry plantain correctly. Like, there's no recipe. You just put it in the oil and, watch it turn brown. That's it.
Wow. If this conversation were to be your last recorded voice, what is one message that you will love to pass on to your generation?
I think without any equivocation, the most important message that humanity needs to hear is you need to think about eternity and where you're going to spend it. And Jesus has made a way for you to spend eternity with him. He's paid the price. Don't let that price go to waste. His entire, to-do list right now is praying for you. Yeah, the Bible says it stands evermore to make intercession. And so don't let all of that go to waste. And you can have a good life being a believer, right? Like, I don't get how people think you give up something because you're a believer. You actually get all there is to get, right? All that's worth getting. There are many things that people get that's worthless, but all that's worth getting, you get it, being a believer. So that will be the thing that I want to say, and to have it resound through the ages. Your eternal destiny matters. And the only eternal destiny that is worth having is the one that you have in Christ.
Wow. This has been an exciting and interesting voyage with Wole. Thank you so much for making the time to sit with me and enjoy the story of your life so far.
Thank you very much, Dimeji, for having me. You've made me go to places that I haven't. And it was a pleasure to speak.
So, as you've listened, Wole's story is not just about building Bankole. It is not just about all of the trials that he has gone through in life, but his life is very inspirational, very challenging. There are moments that are mind-bending, mind-shifting, paradigm shift that has challenged me as a person. And Wole's voice is just beginning. I believe that when we have the opportunity to sit together again, it's going to be another interesting, another exciting venture of going through Wole's trials, transitions, and triumphs, building the Africa of his dream. So until another time, enjoy your voyage.